Welcome, everyone. I am Susan Barashai, founder of C Admissions, and today we're going straight into the core of what makes or breaks an MBA application beyond test scores and GPA, because some of those things there's not much you can do about, especially your GPA. So you've likely heard that qualitative materials like your essays, your resume, and recommendation letters matter, of course, but most applicants still treat them as an afterthought, as if they're numbers, as if the numbers itself will still carry more weight and help them get to the finish line. That is actually quite a strategic error that applicants make in this process. And I know, numbers are easy to understand than essays, but that's why we're here today. This session is about giving you the structure, the clarity to ensure your materials are read the way you intend them to be read and evaluated as powerfully, of course, as possible. So let's dive right in. Let's be honest, strong stats are table stakes. Yes, of course they matter. But at top schools, top-ranked business schools, you're competing against a pool where almost everyone has a solid GMAT or GPA. So strong test scores, academic performance may not necessarily going to carry you through. That's not going to set you apart. What sets successful applicants apart is how they're understood. Admissions isn't just evaluating what you've done. They're looking for potential, leadership character, and clarity of direction in terms of where you're going. So how does that come through? That comes through in your materials. How you tell your story, what you choose to emphasize, what you leave unsaid, and how your materials speak to each other, right? These aren't peripheral parts of your application. They are your application. So if you think about your essays, your resume, your letters of recommendation, and all the other minutiae, all of that is important in telling a successful and putting together a successful application that sets you apart from the next person who has equally strong GMAT and GPA. So today is about clarity. I'll show you what each component, so your essays, your recommenders, recommendation letters, and your resume, what they're actually meant to do from an evaluator's perspective. We'll talk sequencing, which means when to start each piece and why the order actually matters a lot in this process. I'll also walk through some common traps that even sharp, capable professionals fall into and highlight their real client story where smart strategic pivots made a big difference in the application journey. Now, of course, this is a session that is, made for the entire community. So we're not going to go into how to write every sentence, because that is honestly very much personal to the individual and their unique story they're trying to tell. But you'll leave with the insight to stop wasting time, essentially, and start building a cohesive application. So at C Admissions, we work with ambitious professionals, consultants, engineers, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, small business owners who are applying to business school with serious intent. Our approach is not surface level and definitely not surface level editing. We help clients clarify their goals, identify their strongest leadership stories, and build a through line that makes each part of the application reinforce the other. We've supported clients to multiple M7 admits, international admits, so like the INSEAD and LBS and top-ranked schools. Applicants gained full scholarships, so full rides, and first-choice outcomes. And today I'm bringing you a window into the structure behind those results that clients receive. Again, it's not about working hard, it's about working smart and making sure you're maximizing your time most effectively. So your application is a narrative system, and this is a core mindset shift. Most applicants treat their essay, resume, and recommendations as separate assignments, right? But schools are reading them as one story, and it's really important for you to recognize that. Your goals shape how you frame your past. Your resume should reflect the progress and impact that supports your goal. Your essays go deeper, articulating your motivations, your decisions, and what's next. And your recommenders or recommendation letters, they're external validators of what you've already claimed in the rest of your applications. If these pieces are not aligned, the reader starts to wonder, what's the real story? What are we missing here? Because we don't have a full picture of who this particular applicant is. So we teach our clients to sequence intentionally the application. So we first begin with goals, then we work on the resume. Essays and recommendation letters support can be somewhat interchangeable, but there is a sequence to that as well. And that's why nothing in the application of our clients is truly repetitive, even if the stories or some of the stories have been told in different ways. Everything that is put together by the time the full application is submitted is reinforced. So let's start. First thing, we'll talk about the essays. So schools, so this is business school, they're not really judging your literary voice. They're assessing your strategic clarity. So you do not need to be a poet, and your essays do not need to sound like poetry. What they need to do is communicate that you know where you're going, why now, why this school, and any other aspect of the questions that they're wanting you to know. So are you someone who is really conscientious of what they bring to the table? Do you know what your value is? So this is, of course, going to be school-specific component. But the general, across schools, across programs, across at least US and Europe, European schools, do you know where you're going, why now, and why the school is elementary part of every single application. So strong essays are never just personal statements. They are carefully designed cases for admission. And what does that mean? This means that you are compellingly communicating why you are the right candidate for this particular school and that particular program. Where most applicants go wrong in their essay writing is either repeating their resume or offering vague introspection. I've always been curious, language like that. Those honestly are just words that mean nothing from the context of an admissions reader, right? They don't know you, they have never met you before when they read your essays, and all they see is the words on the page. Make sure that those words count. So when you're reading your materials, ask yourself, am I being vague? Am I being really direct in terms of conveying where I want to go, and that I have conviction that I want to do it now? So your essays must bridge where you've been, where you're going, and how the MBA connects the dots between the past and the future. And that structure doesn't honestly happen by accident. It's actually mapped throughout that sequencing I mentioned earlier. Now, let's talk about your resume. Your resume is often the first thing that the admission team or the admission reader sees. And as you know, I'm sure you've heard already from the context of, showing up to a job interview, your first impression matters. The same thing here, even though you're not personally in front of the reader, your resume is, and your resume your first impression or their first impression of your resume actually matters. The resume is not there to prove you've been busy. That is, again, the assumption that all applicants that are applying to top 20 business schools in US and Europe are very busy people, right? What is there to show how you have grown over time, over your career. We coach clients to prioritize outcomes over tasks in resume. And oftentimes when I read resumes of applicants that have been rejected, this is often a huge element. That's the first thing that I see. It's a bunch of tasks and no outcomes. And second thing that I see is that they don't show, or they just show like what they did, so like the final outcome, but we don't see why it mattered and what kind of impact it had on a greater scale of things, and what role did they play in, you know, the final outcome. Because we all know that, you know, nothing is ever done in isolation. Everything is a team effort, and you need to differentiate you from the team and collectively where the outcome has gone. So a strong resume shows influence, ownership, and evolution of your career over however many years of work experience you have. Another misstep that applicants make is over formatting or using a career version of the resume. So I'm sure not everyone, but a lot of people that apply to business school will have applied to jobs, you know, they haven't been in their same job since college. And your resume, and I hear this so many times, well, my resume got me X number of jobs. That is great. However, the MBA version needs to be tighter, more strategic, and built to show a narrative, not just a record of employment. And of course, the admission reader does not know your industry and your job, your employer that offered you the job. You guys speak the same language, right? So you have to really be conscientious of who your audience is. So I'm going to tell you a real story. And for those of you who follow us, and if you don't, you should, you may have heard this story before. So I had a client that came to work with me after speaking with admission officers at multiple schools. He thought he was being proactive, but the questions he asked actually weakened his positioning. He sounded like someone looking for guidance, looking to be handheld, rather than a strong, self-aware candidate ready to contribute to the school. The admission committee, when I saw the email correspondence, the committee or the admission team, the people they were corresponding with, one of those individuals is definitely part of the admission committee, they weren't impressed, and you could see that from the writing. So I asked them to step back, let's rebuild. So we rebuilt the narrative from goals to resume to essays. He reached out again, this time with clarity and with confidence and knowing specifically what he needed based on all the research he had done. MIT invited him for an early, personalized campus visit before he even submitted his application. He applied to the school and he got in. And this is the point about being really strategic in your application. It's not just about checking those boxes. Oh, people say I should reach out to the admission team. I'm going to do that. That's a box checked. You approach it this way as a task and not as a strategic move, you are going to experience not so great of an engagement. And as a result, obviously, they're not going to see you from the beginning as someone who is going to have and make a huge impact in that community. Now, let's move to the recommenders. So recommenders often, not always, but often fly under the radar. And applicants misunderstand the weight that they carry in the application. The recommenders validate your story through the lens of someone who's seen you at work. When done right, they're not just going to be praising how amazing you are. They're going to provide proof that you are someone worth betting on. Too often, applicants assume a senior title means a strong letter. I got my recommendation letter written by the CEO who's met me last quarter in this one meeting for 5 seconds where I mentioned where I said 2 sentences, right? That title does not mean anything, right? Second thing that I oftentimes see is they don't give, or applicants don't give the recommenders enough support in this process. Our clients are coaching recommenders, even if they have written many letters of recommendation before, in helping them with the structure, with the prompt, with the context of how they're presenting their entire application, and what are some of the things that they would want to be communicated in their application. Again, this is about cohesive narrative across the board in all pieces of your application. Vague letters that say she or he is or they are smart and work hard and spend X amount of hours at work because they're so dedicated. Again, that is table stakes. All of your applicant pool of people. Now, this is not a comparison in who you are in your office with, but you have to think about who you are competing with in the context of the MBA application. All of those are hardworking applicants who put a lot of effort, who are ambitious, just like you, right? So statements like that are not going to move the needle in your application. But a letter that highlights a moment of impact with real stakes, with real impact in the organization or the project or whatever it is that the recommender is speaking about, that's going to be memorable from the context of the MBA committee reading your application. And it's, again, done right, going to reinforce your entire application across all different pieces of the narratives that you are compiling and putting together. So let me summarize the most common mistakes I see, even among very talented applicants, is first, writing without a roadmap, jumping into essays before the story is clear. It's a very, very huge mistake. It's just going to delay the entire process, and it's not the most effective way to go about this journey. Second, over-relying on credentials. Having a great job working for Google, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all of these companies, or having, amazing test scores is not the same as telling a compelling story. At the end of the day, they're evaluating you as a leader. And third, under-managing the recommendation process. Hoping your recommenders just know because they've written so many other letters of recommendation and they should know what to say. That is, again, major error from the applicant's part. And finally, sounding articulate, right? Because we all know ChatGPT, but very generic. A well-written essay that says nothing specific, it's not going to move the needle. You are just going to blend in, right? Don't confuse, in that case, polish with persuasion. Your job as an applicant to have success in this process is to be a persuasive communicator in all of the pieces of your application. So you now know the framework. You know what each component must accomplish and why sequencing and strategy matters in the context of putting together a strong application. But having the insight alone doesn't always change outcome. Execution does. Actually putting sort of the proverbial pen to paper is what moves the needle, what gets you the outcomes that you're looking for. Most applicants still treat these pieces like chores, like, oh, I have to write my resume. I'm gonna work on it like 2 weeks before the application is due. The resume, it's a very complicated writing exercise and definitely do not encourage you to do that. Our clients treat every piece of the application, including the resume, including the letters of recommendation, as assets in the full picture of the application. And that's why we have a 94% placement rate in terms of helping them get into at least one of their target institutions. So if you're serious about applying and you are thinking of applying in round 1 or round 2, and you are done trying to figure out what the internet has to say about your application and want to actually know what you specifically have to do, we're here to support. We can walk you through each step, how we approach our process. You can reach out for a free consultation and we can discuss those elements in terms of what you're looking for and how what we offer may or may not support those needs. So we're going to open the floor to questions. There's a lot of questions that came through the registration. So I know this is a very important topic for all of you guys. So let's open the floor. We have about 9 minutes left to questions. Write them in comments of whichever platform you're joining us from live. We will not share your name on the screen, so don't worry about that. And we'll share, obviously, because we've already removed the names of the individuals who have written questions in their registration, in the registration form. We've removed their names, so we'll show those on the screen. But if you have questions, write them in the comments, and I am excited to answer. So whichever questions you have. So let's go to questions that have come in. And as a reminder, those who are still on, next week we're going to be talking about HBS. So the HBS application process, we're moving into school-specific discussions because at this point, deadlines are starting to come out. And I know all of you are very anxiously waiting for those questions to be released. Columbia Business School has already released the questions for the upcoming cycle. So we will be having a session on that probably after Harvard because we've already committed to Harvard. But let's join us, join our newsletter, join the YouTube channel, subscribe to YouTube channel to be informed of all of our future events that we'll be hosting. So let's go now directly into questions that came through the portal. Let's see. There's a question that came through LinkedIn. I'm not sure I exactly understand what your question is. We are not an academic institution. We support applicants get into academic institution, top ranked program. And we support applicants who come from IT backgrounds as well as, some of them get full funding in terms of full scholarship, but there's a number of different elements that come into play when full funding is part of that conversation. So definitely happy to answer a question specifically. I hope that's what you were asking. So let's go with the questions that came in, and then maybe you can clarify what your question is in the comments. So what can I do if I have 1 year until admission and no related work experience and very few extracurricular activities? So my understanding of this question, so if you are watching live and you've asked this question specifically, please correct me if I misunderstood the question. But it looks like you are not applying this year, you're applying next year, and you want to know how to emphasize or how to maximize this 1 year before you apply to make sure that you have a strong candidacy, strong case. If that's the question, you absolutely want to make sure that you are using this period of time to strengthen your profile. So if you don't have related work experience, look for ways that you can build transferable skills. I'm not saying go and change your jobs at this point. We are in the market that may not necessarily make the process of job changing feasible. So don't try to leave the job that you currently have to do something entirely different that may or may not lead to you having the kind of experience of what you want in the future. So use what you have in terms of the experiences in the job that you currently have to build transferable skills. And we can definitely coach you through that. We work with applicants who are applying, who we coach through the building of their application process as well. So if you're interested in that, we can definitely have a conversation. And then look at, I mean, honestly, our process, it's irrespective of when you start the journey, it's always the same. We have to first look at the goals. What matters to you, what your values are, before we even recommend extracurriculars, because they have to be in alignment with what you care about. And they're not just I'm going to tutor this person, for in math or writing or something like that. Those kinds of extracurriculars are so often seen in the application that they're not really that interesting. So you really want to make sure that you're choosing the kind of extracurriculars that are in alignment with what matters to you and what you care about. There's a question that came through LinkedIn also, which universities offer fully funded scholarship? Not M7s, I would say. Other schools do have full scholarship, but again, full scholarship are very few per school. So you may want to look at all the variables in terms of what they offer. A lot of schools, especially for strong candidates who come in with strong test scores, obviously a strong application, because you don't get any scholarship if you don't get in. So they will get partial scholarship, and you may want to then start, if you can't do an MBA without relying on scholarship, then you may want to look at also external scholarships as well beyond the school, to make sure that you get the funding that you need to get the education that you want for your future. All right, let's move to the next question. I was rejected in round 3 by European top MBA programs. They have recommended I take, so I increase my GMAT score and strengthen my resume as I'm not working currently, excuse me. What would you recommend to be a successful reapplicant? So often I don't recommend applying to round 3. Now you have done it, and you see this is one of the proofs of why I don't recommend applying in round 3. Obviously, it doesn't help that you don't have a job or you didn't have a job when you applied. That is definitely something that it makes it difficult for business schools to say yes to applicants. So I would suggest at this point, I don't know if you were able to find a job since round 3 decisions, but absolutely try to find a job before you reapply. So you want to be in the job for at least 6 months, so you can 6 months until the time you apply, so that you can have you can communicate growth, you can showcase impact, and those things that business schools are looking for. In this period of time, also retake your test, retake your GMAT, strengthen that, and then try to apply in round 1 or round 2. Don't reapply in round 3. That again may lead to the same outcome the second time around, and you don't want to keep just reapplying, because obviously it's not the most beneficial use of your time in terms of this journey. So first thing, find a job, get your GMAT score increased, and then think about reapplying in round 1 or round 2. At this point, you may not be ready for round 1, depending on what the deadlines are. So maybe you want to target round 2 and use this time most effectively to get all the pieces that they're looking for ready. Excellent. Last question. How do I make my application stand out, and what should my essays reflect? I get this question so often, and the only thing I can give you, and I can give anyone watching this, is very generic macro level perspectives. Not that I'm trying to gatekeep anything, but because every story is unique. What you need to highlight, how to make your application stand out, has almost nothing to do with the business school itself, right? Business schools accept applicants from all sorts of different backgrounds, and they stood out in their own way. So how you stand out is entirely dependent on what your background is. what your experiences have been, where you're looking to go in terms of your future career. So the question is, it's a very clear one, but unfortunately, I don't know much about you as an individual. How, make sure you stand out by capturing your, impact that you have made in your resume, showcase clarity of goals. But again, I mentioned this already in the presentation, and it's very macro level, in terms of how you stand out. A coach can definitely help you. That does not have to be obviously CA admissions, but the coach can definitely help you understand your story. They understand what business schools are looking for, and help sort of build the bridge between the two, your background and what the school is looking for, to find that, match in terms of those two experiences being put together effectively. All right, we are at time. Thank you for being here. Join next week. We're going to talk about HBS's application. And hopefully by then they will have the questions released. Otherwise, we can still have a conversation about how to get yourself ready for HBS. We will be starting a sequence of school-specific conversations. So if you haven't registered for or haven't subscribed to our channels, please do so you're notified about our future events, and register to our events so that we can send you reminders of these events taking place, and obviously give you more insights in terms of all the work that we're doing here to support applicants, irrespective of them being clients or not. Thank you again, and I will see you next week.